Hello and welcome to the Forbes India show. Forbes Life brings you luxury living, a look at the 20 must-have luxury items of this season. Now today we're going to be talking about the business of luxury, and discussing that with me we have a great panelist here. We've got Ms. Kalyani Chawla, the Vice President of Marketing for Christian Dior India. We've got Tika Singh, who's the advisor of Louis Vuitton India. Pushpanjali Sharma, MD of Luxury Works, who's worked with brands such as Burberry, Versace, Bentley and Lamborghini. And we've got Ankur Bhatia, the Executive Director of the Bird Group. Now let's start with Louis Vuitton. You were obviously a pioneer in the business of luxury here in India, having set up in 2003. Last year, your financial report stated that your profits shot up, LVMH's global profits shot up 73%. So how much did India have to do with that statistic?
Well, I think India still is at the growth stage, a very early stage of development. Its contribution is still very small, but the potential is huge for a business like ours. You cannot compare India with the Chinas of the world or United States or Japan as yet. But in a way, we are glad that we are not at that stage, because when all these markets peak, that's when India will start to grow, and you will need India more. So we are very much at the investment stage of development.
And in comparison to when you first got here, do you see more luxury brands taking an interest in coming into the market?
Oh, sure. I think everyone wants to be in India. The constraints are lack of infrastructure and very high import tariffs. I think if those two issues are addressed, you'll see everybody here. And why not,
So Kalyani, when Dior came in 2006, did you experience some of the same problems that Tika is mentioning?
In 2006, the FDI came into being. So it was perfect timing. And that's, I think, when we saw a plethora of brands. It was probably the best thing that happened to the industry at that time. Unfortunately, there hasn't been much progress since then, as Tika mentioned. We do have our constraints, especially with the taxes, the import duties, very high rentals, which really is, even if you're doing superbly well with sales, at the end of the day, P&L doesn't look that happy a figure. But the FDI probably at that time sent out a very, very positive message internationally. It's one thing to say our GDPs are, growing at this pace and, all these numbers. But at the end of the day, I think the government really needs to do something to help this industry, which is, and there are millions and millions of euros or dollars being pumped into this economy, which is creating opportunities job-wise and giving, luxury, which is going to become soon a part of a way of life, which was unattainable. But
let's talk briefly about the customs. Some brands in India choose to absorb that customs, and some the duty, and some choose to put it on the consumer. What is the strategy?
Very difficult to do that, because if you really have to stay up on board, and legalities are something which are getting tougher and tougher, and nobody wants to not go down the right stream. So, for Dior, for example, we just have to adhere to these rules. There's no way that we can absorb anything, because our overheads are already so high that it's just impossible. We might as well shut shop, then. So, unfortunately, yes, the customer does suffer end of the day.
Okay. So Pushpanjali, do you think that, some of the consumers say, especially if they can afford high-end items, that they could potentially travel abroad, get the same items slightly cheaper, or get a larger collection? What are some of the myths in that, and how do you kind of attack that when it comes to luxury brands?
I really believe that in luxury, one of the chief things still is convenience. Someone who can afford to buy in India can of course afford to buy abroad, and they do travel. But the convenience that brands that are already here, the convenience in shopping that they give you, you can never get abroad. The kind of service being here that they give you, you won't get abroad. In India, even a small store will deliver home. Luxury brands have taken that kind of service to the very next level. We have to, in order to survive in this market. So, yes, there are people who travel abroad, and they do travel and they do shop because they believe that sometimes the ambiance is better.
Right.
But the ambiance in India is improving. The Emporium Mall is an example of that. And the convenience factor is there. So I do think that people are still shopping in India. It is not that it is just abroad that they are going to shop, and that's very apparent from how much the luxury industry is growing.
Okay.
We've been posting double-digit growth.
So convenience is really the luxury that you're offering from India. So in terms of automobiles and luxury cars, you're dealing in BMW. Volvo did a study last year that said that the car industry is actually growing at a rate of 50%, and other people state it's between 30 and 40%. What statistic is accurate, and how are what's changed? Why do people need luxury cars so much all of a sudden?
Well, I mean, if you look at generally from the cars perspective, again, I think the bottom of the pyramid of that segmentation, is something which is opening up now with, for example, introduction of the X1 from the BMW stable. But, other brands are actually doing the same thing as well. So it's just opening up the affordability of getting a luxury brand. I'm sure that's happening with all the other brands as well. That the whole attraction of getting, I think Indian people are extremely brand conscious, and they actually need to, flaunt the brand, what they actually use,
right,
and wear. So I think that's where, I think this thing all comes in. So, with the introduction of X1 here, it's just created this huge demand where, obviously BMW has got backlogs.
Right. Let's talk about Louis Vuitton. Now, when you first came here, there really wasn't an option of retail clusters for you to join. So you did start off with a luxury hotel, your first outlet being in the Oberoi Hotel. And since then, you were one of the first people to actually sign up and be part of the Emporio, a luxury mall concept. That's quite unique. Even the Harvard Business Review did a study on it. So, what was your choice? What was your experience in a luxury hotel perspective, and what was your experience here in a luxury mall, and why did you make that shift?
Well, we always like to take a leadership position. Mm-hmm. I mean, Vuitton is a pioneer. Mm-hmm. The rest will follow. So we spend a lot of our management time talking to developers.
Yes.
We want to be the game changer in India. I think that's a responsibility too, to have in an emerging market and globally. So I think when we first came to India, we had a very interesting meeting with Mr. Oberoi, who my president, Yves Cassel, proposed that he should move his office from the lobby. And, Mr. Oberoi, nobody had proposed something like that to him. But he agreed, he understood that if luxury needed to be seduced into India, stage one would be an environment which would be secure, clean, all the adjacencies would have been covered. So I think that was stage one. We've completed that phase of our development. Stage two would be the mall development. Mm-hmm. And so we talked at the initial stages to DLF. We partnered with them. We introduced them to our architectural team. We showed them malls across the world. Mm-hmm. We spent a lot of time in trying to develop this with them. It was like a partnership with them.
I see.
I think that we are at stage two of development. The third stage would be when retail shifts continues to be in malls but goes to high street. High street development is going to be the real game changer. If ever that happens in my lifetime, I would like to see that happen.
Pushpanjali, do you think that this is somewhat of a hindrance for international brands to consider coming into India, that there is a lack of retail options where you can retail from successfully?
I think initially it was a hindrance because there truly weren't spaces available. We didn't even have a single mall initially when some of the luxury brands came in. And when other brands came in, like a place like Oberoi in Delhi, for example, once it was saturated, there was no more space, but I think that is changing. We are definitely progressing in that area. But real estate was a hindrance not only because of lack of availability, it was also the costs, because when brands initially came in, the retail, like your rents were almost 30%. Now, if you're paying that much, your P&L, like Kalyani mentioned earlier, can never make sense, no matter what you do with your sales. Now we see the rents coming down. We see malls partnering more and more with brands. They understand that it's a win-win situation for both sides.
Right.
If the brands are doing well, the malls will do well.
Right.
If the malls are doing well,
and overall, they say
the
the business of luxury is doing well in India, growing at 25% year on year, and expected to continue at that growth rate. Let's talk for a second about tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Do you see a lot of luxury cars selling outside, and what percentage of your market is in tier 2?
I just sort of like to intervene. Our approach to luxury is a bit bigger than just cars. We are spending nearly $500 million setting up 6 hotels, and these 6 hotels are coming up in Delhi, Goa, Rishikesh, Airport, Cochin. The first one opens apparently this year. We've just invested in another hotel in London as well.
Okay.
Now, of course, we are opening hotels in other cities apart of the metro. So when tier 2 and tier 3, we're spending a lot of money in Jaipur.
So how do you see the consumer, the luxury consumer?
It is coming in, and I would like to just intervene on that, the high street concept. I was surprised in Connaught Place as well. Clark's has opened up, a little shoe center, and I think they're doing phenomenal amount of sales there. I mean, it's not the brand, but I think they've been there, and I think they've I think proved the point that of course High Street can also occur. I think Connaught Place has got good potential for that to happen. Tier 2 and Tier 3 towns, of course, there's great potential happening there as well. But again, I mean, I don't think that there is any concentration of the number of buyers as yet. Infrastructure still poses a huge problem. For luxury and everything to do around luxury. I mean, may it be general aviation, may it be yachts, or hospitality as well, resources, and even approachability. Even if I have to today run a high-end hotel, I have to do my own power, I have to do my own water, I have to do everything. So it's
really from infrastructure.
It's an island. It's an island to do, and I think that's the same thing for this particular mall as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they generate their own power, for example.
Okay, in comparison to international or foreign luxury buyers, how is the Indian buyer different? Do they have different expectations?
India is probably the most nascent market as long as luxury goes. Even Thailand is 30 years old. I mean, it's only about 10 years old now that the first brand came in. 9 years, right? 9, yeah. So, it's really, there's a lot of education required. But having said that, we are culturally, and our heritage is of great luxury. The biggest consumers of luxury, whether it was the cars or the jewelry or the watches, they survived on our Maharajas. We have one sitting here and his family. So no, it's true. But on a general basis, now we're not, the top of the pyramid is such a tiny single percentage even still. Now we're not looking at that, we're looking out at the bottom, and that needs to spread out. And that is what really our target audience should be, because that is the future, because these luxury consumers will always, and they travel, so we don't really depend on that.
Right.
It's the rest. And of course expanding the market and going out, whether it's the smaller cities or just going into other areas within Delhi, for example, reaching out, because there's enough money, there's enough liquidity, there's so much of buying power. I mean, Delhi definitely has the highest buying power in the country,
Let's talk briefly about Bollywood and how that affects even luxury brands' value. I know that Dior partnered with Aisha to kind of showcase their collection. How did that, did that actually, was that successful? Would you do it again?
Bollywood in India and now actually globally is probably the singularly most influential medium of any kind of message that you want to give out there. It reaches everybody. Everyone's hankering for them. They can be difficult, but most of them have also realized that it is more beneficial for them, really, because wearing Dior on a red carpet for them just ups their scale of their image,
And what does it do for the brand?
Tremendous amount of publicity. Aisha, for example, as you mentioned, I mean, it was, the kind of sales it generated after that. It's funny because I've done actually product placements in a couple of other movies, and there was the Gaucho bag, I remember at that time, and Bipasha was carrying it in a film, and everything. Well, that Dior bag that Bipasha was carrying, do you have that? So we had about 5, it had just come in, all of them just flew out of our shelves.
Wow.
So, this is the kind of thing. The Lady Dior bag, which was the main bag of Aisha, suddenly everyone woke up to it, and it is our highest selling bag. It's an iconic bag of Dior. And even the clothes, surprisingly enough, because we did so much publicity around it, because you see, you don't know what I'm wearing. I mean, there are no, labels saying it's a Dior, but we did a lot. You have to then feed in information into the media, which reaches out to people, so they know that this was a Dior dress that Sonam was wearing. So is it available? Is it in the store now? We'd like to have it. So it was a tremendous amount of marketing, and the producers actually spend so much money today on publicity of a film, any amount of budget movie, whether it's a big budget or a small budget, because there's so many people involved.
So for the smaller brands, do you also suggest for them to, even though maybe put in more than they can afford at the time, to invest in product placement in Bollywood films?
See, it's a bit of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg story, right? But Bollywood definitely works. It works in every sphere in India. They're very influential. A lot of the consumer in India is not yet as sophisticated as to understand exactly what they're looking for. See, you have that customer base as well, but there's also the customer base that we are trying to bring up to luxury that has the liquidity, which is still looking for answers, which is looking to you to help them. And the people that they look up to are the Bollywood stars. And just as what Kalyani was saying, in fact, when I was at Burberry, the same thing would happen. If there was even like a photograph of a celebrity, of a Bollywood personality carrying anything Burberry or wearing a t-shirt with the plaid on the inside, I mean, immediately we would start getting queries for just that particular bag, that particular t-shirt,
right,
and it would start going out.
Okay, but now knowing this, still a lot of the international brands, use the same marketing strategy they have abroad. They don't necessarily use Indian brand ambassadors every time. So, I mean, why don't more people cash in on this as far as Indian marketing goes?
I think because your global advertising is done for a global audience. It's not India specific, I'm sure there will be a time one day, not in the not too distant future, where there will be an Indian face in our ads. But we, as a global brand, you have to go with global celebrities, and that way Hollywood is so powerful. I mean, Bollywood is very strong. We do a lot with Bollywood. We have strategic friendships, and we partner these beautiful ladies and get them to Paris, London. We just had an exhibition where Lara was invited. She was, all her fit outs were with us. So there are interesting friendships with them. But Hollywood still dominates the global advertising space,
Right.
You can't do country-centric campaigns, for example. We have like Charlize Theron or Sharon Stone, etc., who represent certain products, that Dior campaigns, Marion Cotillard for the Lady Dior bags. They're globally recognized. So you don't have to go country-centric.
But eventually when Bollywood gets bigger or maybe more noticed, it would maybe
I'm sure
shift.
there will be a time.
Right.
I'm sure.
Right. Pushpanjali, what is one element you think all luxury brands coming to India should have in order to be successful in this environment?
Most definitely the back end. The front end will always come together. You have great brands, you have global brands, they have brand standards that will work. But it's the back end. It's your supply chain management, your warehousing, your inventory management, your ability to make sure you know what people want. So your buying, your merchandising, it's definitely the back end.
Okay. Ankur, what do you think?
I'd agree. I think merchandising to a very large extent, we represent a couple of brands here, and I think customization, the inventory, what you keep in your store, it's extremely important that that's been selected with an experience, because obviously there are certain things, and of course we are sort of new in retail, but and in luxury, in apparel and all that. But I think it's given us some experience, because obviously we need to learn, and I think after your 3 or 4 seasons you're on. But I think that is something which takes time. Again, for a new product coming in, you need that learning to happen.
All right. Just the final point I want to talk about. One of the concerns that a lot of people have is, you're selling very expensive luxury items in one of the poorest countries of the world, and whether that could have any backlash, and if you have any preparations for that.
I think we all have, social concerns. We support social causes. We as Louis Vuitton support the SOS villages. So we in our way try and give back, to society. We do a lot of work with charities. So we are very comfortable with it, we're not the government, we could do much more if we were the government, but we aren't. But as a company, yes, we have a responsibility. We are in a country which has huge disparities, and we would like to try and bridge that gap in any way we can.
Did you want to give some closing remarks?
Yeah, I did actually, because, I think the luxury industry, what you have to sort of look beyond just the glitz and glamour, because there's so much employment being generated through this industry, new employment being generated, new skill sets that are being brought in. So there is some trickle-down economics. Perhaps it can be argued that the ratio is still not correct, right? But it is there, and I think that with time it will just trickle down further and further.
All right, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Kalyani, Tikka, Pushpanjali, Ankur, for being here and for those valuable inputs, and we hope you enjoyed the show.